Okay, good. And welcome. It's Tuesday, March 8th, and this is a meeting of the Wellfleet Board of Water Commissioners. I'd like to start with having Jonathan give us his report. There's a few issues on here, and there may be some questions as well. So, what can you tell us about the status of the water main installation, John?
Hello, everyone. As far as I can see and what I've been seeing, they're moving right along. They have tied into the station at Coles Neck. All of Old Hay Road, Gristmill Way is done down to Route 6. Curb stops have been installed there as well. Hydrants been pressure tested. They also finished installing the main on Old Truro. And now they're out on Route 6.
Okay.
So they're moving right along.
Now, with respect to that, I would like to let folks know that I had a call with Tyler Schmidt and Sabrina from Environmental Partners this afternoon, and was in preparation for a phone call with DOT tomorrow morning. And it has to do with DOT requested this call. It has to do with the permit for the work in the on Route 6. Apparently, the DOT has been very slow in getting back to Environmental Partners about the permit, even though the application was in quite some time ago, and they've been kind of pushing them to finish it up. And so they did, as of last Friday, apparently told Tyler that they approved the permit for the work to be done on Route 6. And so Tyler advised Diggett that that had been approved. And they were prepared already they had already started work on it out on Route 6. They had been prepared to continue working out there. They did not want to demobilize and then have to come back in and, restart. So they were trying to get as much done as they could. So that's why they did the Old Truro Road, and they, had started on Route 6. Not in the on the road itself, but on the shoulder. And then on Monday morning, Tyler got a call from DOT saying, "Oh well, we have to have a pre-meeting before you initiate work there." Well, the work had already been started, and Diggett was aware of this, and did it at their own risk of going in there. So the call is for tomorrow morning, but there's no answer. We do not expect at this point that there's any problem, because they have not been working in the layout of Route 6. It's just on in the shoulder area, and they anticipate that it's just a routine call. And Becky Slick and myself will be part of that call, along with Tyler and Sabrina from Environmental Partners. I just wanted to let you know that's if there is any delay, that's what it's about, but I don't think there will be. Thank you, Jonathan.
All right. Thanks for that update. That's not that long of a stretch. I wasn't up there today, but they're starting on the Briar side, and they move pretty quickly. So by the time your phone call's over, they might not be close to all the way up to.
Yeah, I know. They've been working really fast.
So, and traffic's been moving right along. They really haven't affected any traffic whatsoever. Obviously, it's the perfect time of year to be doing it too.
Right. Okay. You mentioned in that they installed the curb stops. Do you know if it was done in accordance with the original plans prepared by Environmental Partners, or were there any adjustments made? Because I know there was at least one property that had requested a second curb stop be installed.
I don't know that for sure.
Okay,
I did hear about that one adjustment that was made, but other than that, I assume it's just according to plan.
okay, all right. So, anything more on the installation of the water main? Any questions? Okay, on the generator at the Boy Scout camp, I think that you may have to give a little bit of history on this and tell us where we're at with it at this point.
Yeah, so going back to end of last year, the generator, when we were testing the station, when we would kill the street power to the station and be testing the generator under load, it kept shutting off. We came up with a couple small issues that were quickly fixed by South Shore Generator. And still to this day, after performing a load test on the generator, they bring in an outside unit that is drawing electricity from the generator. It ran perfectly for an hour at maximum capacity, generating as much electricity as it could. We're still having the issue when it's supplying power to the station, and it shuts off when we try to run the wells. We've come to the well, it hasn't entirely been concluded yet, but there's what I'm being told now is there might need to be filters installed on the VFDs, which control the motors in the wells, to filter out, an easy way to put it, dirty electricity. I am not an expert in this, but those filters are being looked into, and that's really the state I have. I've stopped trying to test things because I want this new VFD to come in, so we have a second VFD functioning before we do anything else. With only one, I thought it was a smart move to stop messing around with it until this new one comes in and is installed, just so we have that backup. So I know it's slow progress and or not much progress at all, but I think that was a safer call to make.
So when you say the new VFD, is that, how new or how old is the one that's there?
It's been there since I've been around. It's not the one that was replaced a few years back when you had the lightning issue. So right. I believe it might be the original.
Okay.
And that was ordered 3 months ago now, I want to say. Butch Nealon, that he's going to install it. He's been calling, asking where it is. It hasn't been shipped yet. So he's expecting it any day now. And that's all I can say about it.
Yeah, okay. Any questions? You're on mute, Kurt. I say you're on mute.
Thank you. I was trying to find the button. You think, so the generator runs fine, so it's clearly not a generator issue. And it'll run at full load. And then once you engage electricity consumption, the thing's cutting out. And VFDs usually don't, I mean, VFDs have pretty good filters on them anyway, but I don't understand the link between the VFD and dirty electricity. I mean, the generator is providing the electricity. Is there a power factor problem perhaps on the pump motors?
I don't want to say too much because this is all over my head and I'm just learning a lot about it myself, but I've been told that it could have something to do with the VFD calling for more voltage. And even though we put in a new voltage regulator, it could be the generator thinks it needs to provide more for some reason, and that's causing it to shut off. I've also been told that the VFDs should take care of any irregularities in the electricity themselves, like you just said.
Yeah, so that's the way
dirty electricity shouldn't be a problem, but more and more things are pointing to something with the electricity that's coming in, because they run fine on street power. So that's why it's not adding up to anyone.
Yeah, no, street power, the grid has a lot more capacity to correct or deal with, instantaneous load challenges or problems. A generator is much more sensitive.
Right.
It just
So
doesn't.
is it undersized? There'd probably be some more work to do to figure that out. But I mean, I couldn't imagine would have been installed if it couldn't even power one of the 2 pumps that are in the ground.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense either. Has somebody from South Shore come down to try to troubleshoot an electric problem?
I think, in my opinion, he's already done more while I've been up there with him than he should have, because he is an electrician himself. And yes, he's been inside the station looking around at things. I had another guy from Whitewater on our maintenance side come out and take a look at things. And Butch has been there himself too. And everyone is a little bit puzzled, and adding more filters is what everybody keeps saying now. But
is there an electrician involved though somewhere? I mean, all this stuff you could test. I mean, if it's a reactive power issue, you can put in power factor correcting equipment that's very inexpensive. The thing that I would be concerned about, not that you're not doing the right things and not getting good advice, but when you start just swapping out parts to try to figure out what's not working right, that can get expensive and you may not find it. But if somebody gets in there with some meters and, tests, gets some diagnostic information from the circuits, you probably are going to find out exactly what's going on.
Well, 2 out of the 3 people that have been looking at it are master electricians by trade. Okay. We haven't had an electric company out there, but if you want to do that, we could. But on the electrical side of things, I do trust the people that are looking at it already.
Yeah, it's something that we should be able to, with instrumentation, figure out exactly what's going on. It's kind of something's happening when under load, something's causing the generator to trip out, obviously. And that's, obviously it could be a variety of factors.
Yeah, so the last thing South Shore generator said was they could rip apart the entire back end of the generator, but it's very labor intensive and time consuming and will be expensive. And he wouldn't even be able to guarantee that would fix his problems. They basically go through their flow chart of diagnostics and they've exhausted all options, and he could go further, but can't guarantee anything if he does. So that's why
I think he's right.
Off on that.
I don't think it's a generator. It may be a generator problem. I think he's right that it's probably not. But the only way you can know is by having some measurements of line voltage to see what happens when the pump kicks on and the VFDs kick on, and what's actually going on with the loading on the circuit. Because that would tell you, in other words,
Yep.
if there's an instantaneous load that causes the generator to trip, that's easy to see. If it's a reactive power issue, that's easy to see, but you do need the right instrumentation on the circuits. Neil, you just joined us. There's a problem where the generator runs, and then it seems to run fine under full load. And as soon as they turn on, connect the generator, and the pumps start drawing power, there's a point where the generator is kicking off, and they think there's dirty electricity coming from either the VFD or the pumps themselves somehow that may be causing the generator to trip. But you are also expert in this area and might have some suggestions. But you're muted. Maybe, I hope you heard. I don't know. Maybe not. Anyway, Neil might have some ideas on that.
Are you hearing us, Neil?
I think it sounds off somehow.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if he figures it out. I mean, obviously, Jonathan, it sounds like you're, you're heading down the right path, but it'd be nice to get some instrumentation on those circuits to see, to actually measure what's going on.
All right, I'll look into that more. And when this VFD comes in, which you need it no matter what, it's not like, that's going to be installed regardless. I will talk to Butch about that, get his opinions, and if we want to get another electrician in there, we can do that.
I mean, the VFD, one of the benefits obviously is that it's a much softer start, so it's not as much of a, if the older VFD is is pulling a lot of power, a lot more power than than a soft start one, that could cause the generator to trip out too. Seeing a really high initial load, and it just can't handle it.
Yep. The only thing I would say to that is that the one that was installed 2 years ago is the one that's tripping the generator right now. So
Really? It's not the oldest one then?
no, the oldest one will not run right now.
Right.
That's the one that's being replaced.
Right.
So I hope I can give you a better update within the next week when, pending this VFD coming in. I want to get all parties involved there at the same time and put everyone's brains together.
All right. Anything more on the generator issue? Okay. So, let's see, anything else that you want to report, Jonathan?
Nothing major. I would just say a PFAS update. We did collect samples from Coles Neck well 1 and 3. We didn't take them from well 2 only because it is not running. Those were all non-detects. Boy Scout, we did sample again in January, middle of February. The lab told us that they messed up one of their quality control samples and we had to start all over again taking those. So I don't suspect any issues, but I haven't gotten those results yet.
So you're saying that the initial test on the Coles Neck wells 1 and
clean.
3, where there was nothing detected?
Correct.
Okay.
And then we also caught up on the entire sampling schedule at Coles Neck that was missed in 2021 when it was offline. We took all the samples that weren't collected at Coles Neck in 2021 when it was offline.
Right.
All the chemistry samples, nitrates, perchlorates, synthetic organic compounds. That was part of putting it back in service so we could fill the new main with water as we had to catch up on that sampling schedule. So that's been done. And other than that, we've just been doing some preventative maintenance things, hydrant inspections, gate exercising. That's about it. Water usage is very low.
Yeah. Okay. And what can you tell us about, there was this complaint about sand in the water?
We did some flushing, say down West Main, past the DPW, all the way around to Coles Neck at the end of last week. Just routine flushing, and before the main cleaned up, they probably just pulled something in to their service, and then a couple of days later, it made it up to their house and they noticed it. But we did go out again yesterday and flush a little bit more, and all those issues have been resolved. So that was just they were using water at the same time we were flushing, and something got pulled into their line.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'd like to move on then to the issue of the Coles Neck Wellfield improvements, the information that was provided to us by environmental partners, and I think everybody received that. And essentially the the recommendation on this was based on a visit that we had out there in I think it was in early February, and it was we were looking at all of the infrastructure there at the well field, and Tyler Schmidt and Sabrina Castaneda from Environmental Partners were there with us, and subsequent to that, they came back with a report of what they were the recommended improvements for the Colesnick well field, and there's the memorandum that they sent showed that the costs associated with this for the basic kind of minimal work to bring the well field back online would be $183,050, but that was just very minimal work really on the site. There's considerably more that was identified by them that should be done, and that included such things as replacement of the well house that's there, the facility that's on site, and and installation of a generator and work on other systems there, including electrical and the actual pipes, lines from the wells to the pump station. Cost on that was identified as 1.9 million, 1.931 million. A very sizable number. In fact, as I was talking with Kurt earlier about this, he said that it's essentially the same, close to the same cost as what we're paying for the installation of the water main. So there's a lot of work in here that we have asked environmental partners to go back to the owner at Diggett and ask for them to give us a quote on what the cost would be for the work that they've identified in here. But I think that based on what we know at this point about the funding that's available to us in the current cycle, we're not going to be able to do that, to do anywhere near 1.9 million in repairs. And that did not include the replacement of the meters, which is something that we're still facing, that is still there in front of us. So I think that this will have to be revisited. There's obviously more work that needs to be done on this, and Neil and I were talking about it as well earlier, and Neil made a good point that just doing some very quick pricing on things such as the building there, that they have that identified as precast concrete building at 255,000, and that plus a foundation for it, and that's a very significant number, perhaps the largest number in the budget that they've identified here, and we really want to have that looked at. There are probably less expensive options that we can come up with, but if we have to do the minimal amount of work to get the well field back online, running and maintained, that's why they've come up with the pricing of 183,000. So that's just the outcome of what that on-site meeting that we had back in early February. I know Jonathan and his people have been working on getting the wells back up and running, and so I know that work is being done. So but we do not have a generator right now there at that site. And that's something that Environmental Partners has put into this, probably the costs for the larger cost for this, and considered it at like 60,000 that would be required to install a generator there. So it's a very sizable, substantial sum that is being proposed here, and I think we have to have more work done on this before we go ahead with anything. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at I'm looking at their memo, Jim. And what, kind of what they're proposing is completely redoing the entire, everything at that location,
Right.
under that 1.9 million. And, my basic question would be, well, the pumps why would you want to replace the pumps if they're working? I kind of don't understand. It's almost like they threw spaghetti at the wall.
Right.
I don't know that we currently have, I don't know it's hard for me looking at the memo to figure out like what's broken. Because the really expensive $1 million item is a new standby generator, chemical feed, process pipe, and a new well house. So, which, if any of those items are actually, need fixing or are broken type of thing. So I guess the hard thing to evaluate is, how you'd prioritize or what you'd actually want to go forward with for work. There's sort of no assessment of
Right.
like what needs to be done. It's just like, oh, well, if you want to replace the entire site, here's what the cost would be. Okay.
Maybe I could jump in for a second. Ask Jonathan to fill you in on, he's been down there running the wells, testing the wells, gallons per minute. And I don't think you have down there what you think you have. So
Okay.
there's going to be a lot of redevelopment in the wells. Now, was that part of the quote you got from them, from the engineers?
Yeah.
It's installation of new
Okay.
new pumps.
Pumps, so they're going to redevelop them, just put in new pumps?
Rehabbing the well, like say rehabbing well 3 at a cost of 35,000. Exploration for a new well, like a geoprobe, as they put it on here, and that for at least for 2 sites, and that's at 46,800.
Now, are they saying that once they do all this work that they've proposed, that Wellfield is going to be able to put out enough to mirror the Boy Scout station?
Yes.
Okay, that's because the testing Jonathan's been doing, obviously all this work needs to be done, and we had a million suggestions, but the best thing to do for us is to default to the engineers and let them tell us.
But, well, going back to what Kurt was saying, it seems like they just took everything and figured everything has to be replaced. I know that there's at least one of the wells, the pump was fairly new there. So I don't think there was any consideration made for those kinds of issues. Also, for example, the SCADA system, which was, was totally new within the last year for the entire system. It included Coles Neck, and they have SCADA programming in here at $20,000, and some additional equipment that is being proposed for the SCADA system.
Jim, if I could chime in for a minute.
Please.
So when I looked at the two different proposals, the cheaper option is basically get what you have in the ground now as far as pumps and motors go, back up and running, cleaned to work at the best of their ability. The more expensive proposal is to have your true redundant station mirroring Boy Scout. In the event that Boy Scout can't produce a single gallon of water, you'll have a station that can still supply the town. What you have at Kolsnick right now, in my opinion, was never designed to fill a water tower. It was never designed to produce nearly as much water as Boy Scout can do. And that's the issue I'm seeing. Based on all the historical numbers that I dug up from 2017, the last time that station ran, you're getting with the pumps in the ground, and the increase in piping may or may not help this, but with what you have in the ground now, fighting the 46 to 50 pounds of head pressure coming back on it, you're producing 50 gallons a minute. When we run one well at Boy Scout, we're producing 270 gallons a minute. So if you want your true redundancy, which obviously that's what everybody wants, that's where the more expensive proposal comes in. So you can completely rely on it to fill the tower in less than 24 hours, because that's pretty much what with the pumps in the ground right now, it would take all day to get the amount of water out of there you need to keep up with the system. So that's why there's such a difference in proposals. It's rehab what you have and get your little bit of water here and there, or go all out and have a truly redundant station.
Oh, here's the thing that comes to my mind when we're kind of looking at this. Coles Neck really hasn't been operating for some time, so I get concerned when you have a well that's been standing around doing, not really in service. And the same thing is true of the equipment. These systems are designed they're best off when they're pumping. And even if Coles Neck is producing 50 gallons a minute, we don't know what its capabilities are right at the moment, because it's been out of service for so long. And it would almost seem to me that the smart thing to do would be to get that field back up and running consistently, and have it running at some smaller level, but more consistently. So let's say it's providing maybe 5-10% of the system, but actually have that field pumping, rather than it being off completely. And if for example, we were to spend 1.9 million and then put that Coles Neck field up to the capacity that the Boy Scout wells have, and it doesn't run, we're back to the same problem. You've got really expensive equipment sitting there doing nothing. And water equipment sitting around doing nothing just corrodes. So, things that aren't being used, it's just not a good way to run the system. I would think we'd want, pressure support and some level of production coming out of Coles Neck before we even thought about trying to, upsize it to mirror Boy Scout camp.
I only bring that up, mirroring Boy Scout, because I thought part of the goal of the water main replacement project was to bring some sort of redundancy to the system.
Right.
And I'm just trying to make the point that with what you have for infrastructure at the well site right now, putting in bigger pipe out in the road is not going to bring redundancy.
Well, I think maybe we were under the false impression then that in fact the primary reason that we did not have redundancy was the fact that we had a 4-inch water main running along Coles Neck Road. And it isn't just that, is what you're saying. It has to do as well with the actual equipment that's there on that site.
Correct. It starts at 150 feet deep in the ground at the pumps. Right. And then that follows 2-inch pipe all the way through the station. So no matter what you have after that, you can only force so much water through that 2-inch pipe with a 5 horsepower motor.
Yeah.
But where would we have gotten the impression that Coles Neck could supply, I can't off the top of my head remember the number, but, was what DEP was looking for redundancy. And the whole, what this conversation is calling into question kind of what we did, what we recommended to the town.
Right.
Well, that I've been trying to say to EPG this whole time since it started, like what is the end goal of this? Because you still have all that 2-inch pipe all the way into the ground. And I don't know. I've been a little confused by it the entire time. I mean, it's great that you have all that new pipe going in now. More hydrants, more people might connect. It is an expansion, not just a replacement. But in a way, I think you maybe should have started at the source and looked at that.
You mean the wells?
Correct.
Well, I think what I'm confused about is why EPG wouldn't have said something about the wells not having enough capacity once we added the main.
I mean, you're right. And I think if we go back and look at the memo or the memos that we received from EPG regarding the replacement of this water main with an 8 or 12-inch main was the answer here. That it isn't that isn't the whole answer. Obviously, no, finding that indeed there's work that would have to be done in the well field that was not reflected in any of the communications that we had from them before.
The last thing I heard from them was they're going to update their models and with bigger pipe between the wells to the station, and then with the bigger pipe coming out of the station and get back to me. I'm just concerned that with 2-inch pipe still coming out of the ground, the drop pipes and 2-inch pipe in the station itself, you're still going to have that bottleneck. And they haven't gone back to me with their updated models. So at a minimum, I'd like to see the pipe coming through the station be increased from 2-inch to 4-inch. I think you just need to get rid of that bottleneck and you might be better off.
And if they do that, do they know that there's, and you might all be able to answer this question, do they know that there's enough water in the ground to do that at Coles Neck?
I believe we have reports from some time ago that would suggest that there was sufficient water there based on the pumping that was done early on, but I don't know how that was done. If they only had a 2-inch line in there, they would have been limited by that to begin with.
Yeah, that's just getting back to Jonathan's. Let's start at the beginning. Make sure you have what you need and then make a plan from there.
If we don't have enough water in the ground, we've made a $4 million
pumping capacity.
Well, you can still feed it from Boy Scout, right? That big main. So, but I don't think that's going to be the case. It's just something that was in my mind, and I just thought
it's not going to
I
be.
really don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, DEP wanted redundancy. That was the whole reasoning behind this expansion in the first place.
And as far as water sitting equipment, you're absolutely right. But I worked at a place up here that has 21 stations, and with in the summertime they're all on, but in the wintertime they just alternate them, and it keeps everything running. And that's how if you did have a redundant station, you just have it programmed so they just simply alternate.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why we had an E. coli problem. Had stuff been running, we wouldn't have run into. It's unlikely that we would have had that problem.
My investigation shows that well 2 is what caused that. Simple as that. I really feel strongly about that. That's where that came from.
Yeah, there was a break in the electrical conduit on well 2.
There was, but plus, and I found spiders in there and what have you, but which is, that'll do it. But
I
as
think
he
that
said, it
was
may have
caused by that was caused by a lawnmower.
really. Huh.
That's
I
been my experience with the electrical conduits getting hit by lawnmowers.
Yeah, one of the suggestions I saw was to raise the well heads up. And maybe that's exactly the reason.
No, it's at an adequate height, but you can't have a break in the electrical conduit.
Well, Jim, I'm not sure where to go from here, but I'm awfully confused. And, maybe we ought to have Paul Millett, come to a meeting and talk about this more.
Yeah, I agree.
Clear goal needs to be set before any more money spent.
Right. Tom, did you want to say something?
Oh, I agree. I have one question though. Do we have to go along with how much water do we have? Do we have the pumping capacity if we had perfect piping?
Well, well number 3R is capable of producing over 300 gallons a minute.
Good.
So that's a yes, just with that one well. Neil, what Jonathan has been saying is that the 2-inch pipe that's coming out of the wells is a big piece of the bottleneck, as well as the 2-inch piping that goes from the well in the station to connect into the main. What's kind of your thoughts on that?
If you're going to use the full capacity of well 3R, you're going to need to upgrade the size of the pipe from 2 probably to 4-inch pipe.
So given that, Neil, would it make sense then probably to upgrade, each of the wells to 4-inch?
Yeah. But the 2 wells, numbers 1 and 2, are steel cased wells, and their life is just about up. Well number 3R is a PVC well with a stainless steel screen.
Do you offhand know what the capacities of 1 and 2 are? I mean, in other words, does it make sense to upgrade those to 4-inch and just, do new casings?
Yeah, the casing will cause the discoloration that has been observed thus far, especially if it's not used regularly. So we would need to replace wells 1 and 2.
If 3R has 300 gallons a minute, do we really need 1 and 2 if we have the Boy Scout wells as well?
Probably not. But I don't know what its pumping rate is because when it was installed, they put a really big pump in to test it. But I don't know what the capacity of the current pump in 3R is.
Right now, it can only produce 70 gallons a minute at 0 head pressure. That's through
That's
2-inch.
not much.
That's through 2-inch. So you increase that, it might change, but correct. That's my concern is what you have in the ground for pumps. I don't think can fight the pressure that the tank is providing to give you any significant output.
Do we know what the make and model of the pump in 3R is?
I would have to find that for you. I don't have it right in front of me.
That would be a step in the right direction, unless we could do a flow test on it. You can have an isolation valve. I think there's an isolation valve and a test port on the well.
to my mind, it seems like the real question is how much redundant capacity do we need, and from what pieces of equipment. We've got just because we have those wells doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right thing to do. I mean, they were installed for an entirely different purpose when they were installed, right?
Very limited use.
Yeah. And if 3R has 100 gallons more per 100 gallons per minute more capacity than the Boy Scout camp wells, if we lost the Boy Scout camp wells, then that would be sufficient, assuming that we upgrade the pump and upgrade the internal piping and the casing.
That's correct.
You would think you would want 2 pumps in each well fill, though.
It feels
You would
good. I mean, I agree.
You would think so, in case something happens. Just saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I but we kind of have, but if the Boy Scout camp wells right now can back up the whole system. So in effect, it's not like we don't have the other wells. We actually have 3 wells we have 5 wells, and the issue is how many wells, does it make sense to have, and how do we dispatch them so that they're running, they're getting good use, and that we have adequate backup capacity in the case we lose, whatever, 30%, 50% of the pumping capacity of one location or another.
Well,
I just don't know what good, 1 and 2, those wells do us if they're sitting there not ever doing anything.
If they
Producing rusty water, that would be why they weren't used.
Yeah.
if they're online and they're in good condition, we can program whatever we want to run whenever we want it and make sure they are all in a rotation.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, we should do that. But the big question in terms of capital investment is how much capacity do we need for what our needs are, and what do we do in the event of an outage? What's our emergency management scenario, and how much redundancy do we need?
Tom, you wanted to say something?
No,
Be thinking Boy Scout or Cole, pick 1, 2, 3 pumps. Which one of them runs? And if any one of them can maintain minimum work, we're okay.
Yeah.
We're not hearing you, Tom.
Tom, you're cutting out. You said. I'm not good at lip reading yet.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Okay, I'll
You
see
say-
if I can fix something here.
Oh, there it started to come in. I mean, I did hear that you said, because we have Boy Scout 1, 2, and then the Coles Neck well there, we've got 3 wells that are in service. And so, but then you were trying to make other points.
Any one of the pumps maintain
Maintain what?
that.
What I was going to suggest, Tom, you want to call one of us with your cell phone, and then we can, if you put you on speakerphone. Do you have capacity where you are, Kurt?
Yeah. Tom, if you call me at 603-209-6000, I can patch you in. We-
603-209-6000.
Then at least we can get your audio. No, still don't have them.
But Kurt, I agree with you, your earlier recommendation, which is that we get environmental partners, Paul Millette, in and have a larger discussion on this issue as to what we need based on what we have at the Boy Scout Camp Wellfield, and what would really provide redundancy if we had to have it at this site. That is and hopefully it would be somewhat less than replacing all of the equipment and having 3 wells there at that site on Coles Neck.
Jonathan, do you know what our target capacity is right now? Like what we actually need at peak for minimum pumping capacity? So like in the summertime peak.
Summer, I think the most I saw you used last summer was 79,000 gallons a day.
Right.
Somewhere in that range.
Yeah, so 79,000. So 1440. So if I do the math right, if I take 79,000 gallons and I divide by 1,440 minutes, we need 54 gallons per minute.
Yeah, that would get you your daily usage.
So our daily requirement. So that's kind of like the minimum is around 50 to 60 gallons per minute.
Yeah, that's if the running all day though. So I never look at it like that. I get what you're saying, but you don't want those to just be running for 24 hours straight.
No. Of course not. But that's also peak. And obviously at less than peak, they're not running as often. And
Yep.
And I don't know. I mean, Paul could probably help us walk through some additional calculations in terms of looking at how much reserve we need, how much pumping capacity we actually need, so that we can get a better handle on what our redundancy requirement is. Do we want 2 times, 3 times, 4 times our peak capacity? We know we can always put in more wells later on too. So as the system grows, we can add capacity, but in terms of what should be operating and should be installed right now, I think that's a different question.
I agree. I do think there's some middle ground between the 2 numbers they gave you that could get you what you need and should have without basically putting a Boy Scout down in the woods there.
But based on what Neil's saying, at a minimum, we definitely need to get the casing size increased and that pipe running in the on the facility increased also. And then the other question is, well, how much bigger a pump do we need? And I think that's it, right?
Yeah, the only thing that the 2-inch inside the station, that's going to be tough that's going to need to be replaced. So that means ripping apart the entire building, basically. You're coming up through the floor, new piping inside. And at that point, I don't know. You need bigger pipe in there. So you have to come through the floor again, I don't know what that's going to entail. Everything's bigger, requires more area. What are we left with for space? That's going to be a big piece to it. That's going to be the hardest part if you're not tearing down that building, which I'm hoping Paul will. He's not just going to say, take my $1.9 million idea and this is what you need. But it's going to be more than just work on the wells.
Well, his estimate, the 1.9 included a new station. I mean, basically it was starts from scratch.
It's a 12 by 20 foot proposal. It's about twice the size of what we now have.
I believe that's exactly what Boy Scout is.
Well, I say, let's do that. Let's get him in. And,
Yeah, he's the guy. He's the one that can tell us what the models say. How much water is coming out of can come out of the ground, what the permits currently say, all that stuff. He's the guy. He really is. So.
all right. So, are we finished with this issue?
I think we just got started.
I think we just got started and Paul's the next step.
Well, I was going to throw another wrench into this. That's all. That is because with respect to the cost on this, I know we thought we had we had approval for borrowing of up to 3.8 something million here, but that was with the assumption that we were going to see that we were going to get a grant funding, which we did, 2.5 million. But we learned more recently that the finance department did in fact borrow against that 3.8 authorization to the tune of the difference between the 2.5 million that we received of grant funding and the 3.8 million that was forecast as the cost for the new water main. So, which means that roughly that they borrowed 1.3 million, and that is now sitting out there associated with this project. It's now part of our debt service, and that we'll talk about that in a moment. But the reason I say this is that I think it's going to be a difficult sell for us to request any more than that 1.3 million at this point to complete this project this year at least. I think we're going to have to look for alternate sources of funding to do more work than we can afford to based on the funds that are available, the 1.3 million that is potentially available to us now. I don't know if they can sharpen their pencils that much at Environmental Partners to get us down to that kind of funding level here. But it's going to be a challenge for us going forward if we have to do that much work on that well field using the resources we have currently available to us. At any rate, if we if we are through with that and the point where we can, get Paul Millette and his staff in to talk about this, I'd like to move on then to the water system budget for fiscal year 23. And I'm going to direct you to look at the report that we got from Doug Gardner on the rate structure analysis, because I believe it is page 3 of that report shows the 5-year budget schedule for the water system. And the budget that's reflected for fiscal year 2023 that's listed on that page 3 of the report is essentially what has been proposed now that will show up in the warrant for the coming year. I don't know if you have that in front of you. It shows for the total operating expenses of $162,000 for the year for 23. And then the balance of the cost is in debt service, and that's principal of $122,180, interest of $86,636, for a total debt service of $208,816. The issue on that is that number, that $208,816, now reflects our debt service that was associated with our prior loans, the USDA loans that we had for phases 1 and 2 of the expansion of the system, and now also includes the cost of the borrowing for the additional 1.3 that had been taken, or that had been borrowed against the authorization from the annual meeting that we had in 2020. So the total now for fiscal year 23, between operating expenses and debt service and kind of general fund costs, it comes out to $417,902, which is a substantial increase from what we have seen in past years associated with the water system. It had been up until this last year, it was like in 280,000, somewhere between 280,000 and 300,000. So it's a significant increase. And the proposal that is that we're asking that the town take over the entire cost of the debt service. This is going to be a significant request at the annual meeting. And there's no assurance that the voters are going to agree to do that. In the past, they've contributed a general fund contribution to the system, but it has been at a lower level, so this is a large increase for the town in terms of supporting our budget. I would welcome any comments on that.
Yeah, Jim, the general fund, I think probably the way to think about it though is that, this is an increase in the general fund contribution, but the general fund contribution has been growing every year anyway, because, rates aren't collecting the amount of money that we need. You know what I mean?
Right.
So do you offhand know what the general fund contribution was last year?
I think it was around 120,000.
So this is basically doubling the general fund contribution, and that includes the it's about 80,000 that's related to the Briar Lane expansion.
Right.
So that's really, when you look at it in, you know, in total, that's not that bad. So we probably, obviously we've got a cell job to do there, but
Right.
that's not that heavy a lift. I mean, we're talking about 80,000 related to the new expansion and and 100 to get the system on a sustainable basis.
Yeah, but hopefully, I think the goal here, and this is part of the financial analysis that is underway, the recommendation, or actually not recommendation, the requirement is essentially that the connection fees associated with the system cannot be used for operating expenses. They have to be reserved for infrastructure improvements. So we can't rely on those like we have been doing in the past when money came in from consumers here. If it was for water usage, it got lumped into what was also coming in to pay off debt service or to pay off the deferred connection fees. So we were using, it was all put in one pot, and it was used to fund all the expenses associated with the water system. We're learning now that we can no longer do that, and that the connection fees have to be reserved for infrastructure improvements. The idea being that going forward, if we can build the reserves, and that then we have need for new equipment or repairs or whatever, that we can use those connection fees for infrastructure improvements, or replacement of equipment, for example. Hopefully the goal would be that we would build the revenues from operations, from the sale of water, and basic service fees, that we would build that enough that we would then make the operating portion of this essentially self-funded. Is that the way you saw it, Kurt?
Yeah, exactly. I think, we all know that because the general fund contribution has been rising over time, that there's something fundamentally unsustainable about the system. And so this is an approach to, I think it was news to both Jim and I, as Doug was going through his analysis, that we couldn't use the repayment, the repayment fees as part of our operating budget. Once you pull that out of the operating budget, that changes significantly how you've got to go about accounting for your operating expenses. And so, that's what he's been working on, a rate design to recover the operating expenses, along with the idea of separating the principal and interest payments directly to the town. And using connection fees in that, making deposits of connection fees into that separate account so that the funds are no longer commingled. I don't know, maybe that helps clarify it a little bit. It's main, part of this is an accounting issue, and then the other part is, what the Board of Water Commissioners want to do in terms of, I would say, design, system design objectives. In other words, when I look at the numbers, the big thing in my mind is that if we get more customers on the system, our financial issues go away pretty quickly. And our biggest challenge has been getting new customers. Relative to, so that's on the operating side, and that's what's really going to make a big difference. Otherwise, if we don't get new customers, we're going to have to keep increasing rates over time, because obviously the operating costs are going to continue to go up. And so that's, that's sort of one side. So rates and operating costs. The other side is the debt service and how to actually deal with the debt service. If there's, Jim and I were talking about this earlier, but for everybody else's benefit, between the ARPA funds and between the Cape Cod water protection funds and some other grant sources, Mass Works, we probably are in a position to put in a request to get our capital, our debt service waived. In other words, get funding from one of those pots of money to actually wipe out our debt service. That's being done for the town of Falmouth, for Barnstable, for Chatham, and I think Provincetown. They've all made requests that would effectively significantly reduce their debt service. And we have I think a great case to make, but at the end of the day, we could potentially be removing significant portions or retiring what the capital or what the contribution is from the town if we can do something else on the debt service side. Otherwise, we'd have to recover that debt service out of transfers from from rates, to ultimately pay down what the town's contributing, so that the water service is no longer being quote unquote subsidized by the general taxpayer. But those are kind of the issues that we need to wrestle with, I think.
Right. Well, for the benefit of the others, our plan here is that we want to have a meeting on the 29th of March and ask Doug Gardner to join us for that meeting to kind of go over his recommendations on the rate structure and his recommendations for how we may want to change that. We're also going to have to make some decisions regarding such things as connection fees, frankly, I'm of the opinion that if we can't use the connection fees to help cover our operating budget, they're going to sit in a reserve until they're needed. Growing that at based on a $6,000 connection fee per customer is perhaps an overreach, and that we could perhaps reduce that somewhat and make it more attractive for folks to connect to the water system by reducing the initial connection fee. I know that there's probably going to be some resistance on that, particularly from people who've already paid a connection fee into the system. But so we'll have to deal with that. I may need legal counsel opinion on how we approach that. But it's something I think we're going to have to think about, because if we maintain a connection fee of $6,000 per household, and on top of that, then the customer is faced with plumbing costs to connect to the system, and it's going to discourage them from connecting to the system, and it means that those people who are facing, let's say, replacement of a well, will just say, well, I'll replace the well. It would be cheaper to do that than to go ahead with connecting to the water system based on that high connection fee. And we also know that that connection fee is much higher than what it is on most of the other towns on the Cape. So, so that's something we have to think about.
Yeah, for example, Falmouth has a connection fee of like $1,500. I had sent around, and I can send it around again, but there, is an analysis of, water rates across the Cape. And what I noticed in most of the other towns is their connection fees are a lot lower than ours. In some cases, I think as little as like a couple $100, like $500 or $800. Most of them are significantly less. And I think that's to, to encourage people to connect. If you look at, Neil, do you know, if you were to sort of take a stab or a guess at what it costs to put in, a new well for a, let's just say a 2-bedroom home, what, kind of what is that number? What are people looking at?
Probably around 4,000 to 5,000.
So if it's, 4,000 to 5,000 for a typical homeowner, and we're charging 6,000, plus they have to do the spade work to connect from the service connection into their home. So the meter stop, I'm sorry, the connection,
Curb stop.
the curb stop, excuse me. So, those costs are often around another, what, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000.
It can be that much, in some cases even more.
So you're kind of looking at close to, let's just say $8,000 to $12,000 to connect to the, to our water system versus, 4 to put in your own well.
Right.
And then you got to pay the operating costs. You got to pay the fees that the water system charges you for water over time going forward. And you only have to pay the electricity cost for your well.
Right. So we're going to have this presentation by Doug Gardner on the 29th of March, and I encourage folks to read through his report. It talks about a 3-tiered rate structure, and that's in there, and the base service fees, which will be increased, which he's proposing that we increase. These issues around connection fees, and what we do with multi-unit properties, those are topics that are up for discussion that we will have to make some decisions on. But that's so we will be, hopefully we'll be able to address some of those concerns at that meeting on the 29th. Any questions on that? The next item on here is on the SCADA system. And I'm going to ask Neil if he can tell us what he learned from Butch Nealon about the SCADA system and whether or not it's vulnerable to any kind of data breach.
Well, I talked to Butch yesterday regarding this, and basically I'm satisfied with the security protocols that we're using. The control of the system can be done via the internet with the proper security codes. But even though if a break-in occurs, the system has limit switches so that nothing can be adjusted via the internet that puts it in an unsafe range. So I think I'm satisfied with the explanation he gave. So somebody breaking in could maybe make a slight adjustment, but nowhere at a level that would be harmful to the system or the users.
Right. Good. Any comments or questions on that?
That's good news. That means the Russians can't hack our system.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause, 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 Good, all right.
unless they pay the connection fee.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So that's good news, and I think the other good news was that we were pleased that the PFAS testing on the Coles Neck well field came back with no findings there. So we're both well fields are free of any PFAS issues at this point.
Hey, can I just ask one quick question, Jonathan? I hate to go back to the topic we already were on, but the Boy Scout wells 1 and 2, are each of them 200 gallons a minute, or is it 200 together?
We run them independently right now, only one at a time, and we produce 270 a minute. And
On either one?
out of either one, yes. So if we
Okay.
were to take a sample combined, we can get that 500 gallons a minute. Yes. Or 540.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to get the math in my head relative to the 54 gallons per minute at peak that we need. Okay, thank you. Sorry to go back on that, but thank you.
No problem.
I think we could also ask environmental partners for more information about this as well, in terms of the production capabilities of those wells there. If they have reports of what the existing pumping capacity is there. But I know that I've seen reports, and I don't have them here with me, that did speak to the testing that was done on the wells there to demonstrate that they were able to meet the levels required by DEP, the production of, say, 100,000 gallons a day. Not necessarily that it could be delivered, but that we could produce that much from those wells. Okay, we have a couple of sets of minutes, right, Karen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so, and those were distributed to everyone, correct?
Yes, they were.
So we have the minutes of December 7th, 2021, and we did not vote on these at the last meeting because we didn't have a quorum of voters who could vote at that point for on that meeting. So can you tell us who was at that meeting, Karen?
I don't have the minutes in front of me. It'll take me a while to pull them up. Anybody else got them there?
Yeah, I'm looking at them. I was there, Kateri was there, Neil was there, and Jim.
Okay. So that was it. Yeah, Tom wasn't there with us on that one.
Yeah,
So-
Tom wasn't the only guy who wasn't with us.
So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of December 7th?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, a roll call vote. Neil,
yes,
Kurt,
Yes.
Kateri? You're muted, Kateri.
Okay, let's see. Hello, you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. So 4 in favor,
4.
none opposed, 1 abstention. Okay, then the next one is a set of minutes for January 18th, and you have those in front of you, Kurt?
I do. You were present, Kateri was present, and Tom was present.
Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
So move.
Second? Okay, roll call vote, Kateri?
Yes.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So the, um, both sets of minutes pass with unanimous votes. Okay. In terms of new business, I suggest that obviously our next meeting is, I think much of that's going to be taken up with this discussion of the rate structure and the work that that Doug Gardner did on that. In addition to Doug, Charlie Sumner will be joining us for that meeting as well. So I encourage you to read through the information he provided. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Happy to try to answer any questions that may come up. And so that is on March 29th at 4 p.m. And right now, just to let you know that as far as we know, the annual meeting will be held is pushed out into June. I don't have that date right here in front of me.
I think it's the 11th. They're voting on it tonight.
Okay. So we will have a chance with, in April to revisit the budget issue and to make our recommendation on that, because we will have to have that, have a recommendation that goes in the warrant for that. Well, when we meet in April, we will be discussing that. If there's no further business, I'd like to move to adjourn the meeting. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Okay. Roll call vote. Kateri,
Yes.
Neil,
yes.
Tom? Yes. Kurt?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So thank you. And Jonathan and John, thank you for being with us and for your, helpful reports on all these issues. It was a lot of stuff in this meeting today. So I appreciate everybody's contributions on it.
Jim,
You're welcome.
I'd